Now, this also has to do with this Mishnah that we got to in Pirkei Avot, Mishnah Bet, Chelek Bet, Mishnah Zayin, 2:7. אף הוא ראה גולגולת אחת שצפה על פני המים, אמר לה, אל דעטפת עטפוך, וסוף מטפייך יטופון. Don't worry, I didn't understand it either. Hillel is telling us again, he's the one that's been telling us the last few Mishnayot, of something that happened in his life. But what happened here seems like a simple event, but it could easily change your life if we just pay attention to the details. He also saw a skull floating on the water. And he said to it, he spoke to the skull, because you drowned others, they drowned you. And eventually those who drowned you will be drowned. Hillel here is talking to a skull. This doesn't sound like something a genius would do, a holy person would do, but nonetheless, it's exactly what they would do. Because here he's teaching us one of the foundational 13 principles of faith, that if you do not believe in it, you cannot consider yourself 100% Jewish. If you do not believe in it, and you went into a front of a bed din, like some of my students that want to convert, they won't convert you. If you don't believe in it, you have no share of the world to come. It's a pretty big belief. And the belief is, yesh din v'yesh dayan. There's a judge that judges us, and he judges us. For the righteous, there's a reward. For the wicked, there's a punishment. If a person does not believe in reward and punishment, they're not believing in one of the foundational principles of the Torah. And Hillel is telling us here, he sees this gulgolet, this skull floating in the water. He says, a skull doesn't just float in the water by itself. It got here somewhere. If this person was a decent human being, Hashem wouldn't give him such a horrible ending. Not just a horrible ending as far as the fact that he died, but a horrible ending in the sense that he didn't even get the honorable type of burial. Now, of course, we know there's Asara Ahugei Malchut. Rabbi Akiva was one of them. And we know that they all got horrendous deaths. This does not mean that they were wicked. This was a sacrifice. It was a kaparat avonot for things that happened in previous generations. But nonetheless, they still got, many of them, still got the honor of being buried. It's rare for someone not to get the honor of buried. Some of them didn't, unfortunately, but that's a different story. On a general perspective, most people, regardless of how they pass, have the honor of getting buried, have the honor of getting respect. But this gulgolet, this skull, did not. And Hillel says it's because it's something it did. The skull belonged to somebody, and it's not some mikre, it's not some coincidence or some accident. Hashem didn't miss out. Hashem didn't make a mistake. There's no such things as Hashem making mistakes. If Hashem was able to make mistakes, He wouldn't be Hashem. He would be human. So Hillel is telling us here that first and foremost, you have to know that everything we do has a consequence. In the Gemara, Masechet Shabbat, it gives us this principle directly from the Torah. Rav Ami said, En mita belo chet ve'en isurin belo avon. There is no death without a transgression, and there's no suffering without sin. So this is a pretty short statement, but it's huge. First, he's telling you there's no such thing as someone dying without them making a sin, with the exception of 4 people. In the Gemara, Masechet Shabbat, same page, just A little further on, 55. It says there's 4 people throughout history that died without making a sin. And the only reason Hashem killed them is because of the sin of Adam. The original sin. Other than that, they didn't make any sins. Who are those 4 people? One of them is Moses' father. Another one is King David's father. Another one, it's Benjamin, Yaakov's son. And the fourth one is one of David's sons. So we have Chilav was his name. So we have 4 people throughout history that are noted in the Gemara Masechet Shabbat, page 55b, saying there's only 4 people in history that didn't sin. And they died for an original sin. They died for a previous generation sin, many, many, many years before. But the rest of us, the only reason someone ever dies is because of some type of sin they made in their life. But then it says something else. It says, and there's no suffering without sin. So wait a minute. First you die because of the sin, then you suffer because of the sins. Which one is it? So here we see that there's a significant difference in the words for sin in Hebrew. Chet is a sin that was accidental. You didn't know it was a sin. You didn't mean to. You accidentally ran into the light switch on Shabbat and turned it in. Not on purpose. Accidentally you ran into it. In the days of Sanhedrin, days of Bet HaMikdash, you have to bring a korban. You turn on the light on Shabbat, you have to bring a korban. By accident. If you did it on purpose, and there was 2 witnesses, they'd kill you. There's no tshuva. You turn on the light on purpose, oh, it's funny? Yeah, it's fine. You bring a korban. You become the korban. Bemet. Now why do you have to bring a korban? You learned it by, you lit it by accident. Come on. Hashem, relax. I didn't mean to turn on the light. Why do I have to bring a korban? It's not a cheap korban. It's a whole cow. $10,000, $20,000 for one light. Hashem, no. Relax. Let me be like the poor people. Bring a little bird. One light. I have to spend $20,000. You really need this korban. You really need this cow. There's 15 million other people who bring a korban every Shabbat. Why do you have to bring my korban? Because in reality, Hashem is trying to tell you something. That accident you made, it should have never happened. If you had the proper amount of Yirat Shamayim, if you had the proper amount of fear of Hashem, you wouldn't have even dared to make an accidental sin. And the korban is just a reminder that in reality, you're supposed to be the korban. In reality, you're the one that's supposed to die right now. But I have mercy. Because if I judge that strictly, the whole nation wouldn't survive a week. But that's accidental sin. On purpose sin, there's no tshuva. No tshuva. Where we learn it from? Tzlofchad. Tzlofchad we're going to read about in a few months. It's the first violator of Shabbat in history. This is in the Torah. This is not Chazal, this is not Rashi, this is not Midrash. This is actually a story in the Torah. A person by the name of Tzlofchad, who a week after we got the Torah, meaning we've only had the Torah for 2 weeks, he violated Shabbat. They arrested him, and Moses came to Hashem and he said to him, Hashem, what do I do with him? What do you mean, what do you do with him? He knows the Torah, Moshe. Moshe was already in Mount Sinai. He knew the Torah. He doesn't know what to do. The question is, now what to do with him, whether I should judge him and kill him or not. The question was, what kind of death penalty is he going to get? The worst kind or the second worst? And Hashem says, the worst kind. Kill him with stoning in front of the entire nation. So for anyone who's still wondering whether Shabbat is important or not, or has family who's wondering whether Shabbat is important or not, they should know, they should read the Torah. They learn about a person by the name of Tzlofchad who violated Shabbat only 1 week after we got the Torah. Meaning that if there was ever leniency from Shamayim, say, you know what, you only had the Torah for a week. You didn't read the whole book. Come on, it takes us a year to read it. And we're dedicated. A week you're going to read the whole Torah? You didn't read the whole book. Relax, Hashem, no? No, relax. I gave you Shabbat, you have to keep it. So if he didn't have an excuse, we definitely don't have an excuse, because we're 3,330 years later. We had enough time to read the Torah. And this is why Pirkei Avot also says that someone who makes a sin as a result of lack of knowledge, if the lack of knowledge is just because he studied but just didn't get to it, then it's shogeg. Then it's accidental. But it's of lack of knowledge because he just didn't study, period. He chose not to study, then that sin becomes intentional, becomes mezid. No one shows up to Shamayim with shogeg sins, with millions of shogeg sins if he studied Torah. It's either mezid, it's either on purpose, or there's no sin. Or very few accidentally you haven't gone to it because you didn't complete the whole Torah. So here the Mishnah is telling us that chet is an accidental sin. Avon is on purpose. So Rav Ami here in the Gemara is telling us one of the foundational things that is going to explain to us this Mishnah, and actually a controversial issue called reincarnation, Gilgulim. He's saying here, if someone made an accidental sin, then they're going to get suffering. Because in reality you're supposed to get death penalty, but I'm going to give you suffering just because I'm going to give you another chance. The suffering is actually a reward. The suffering is called kaparat avonot. Just like the kaparat avonot that I had on the way here. Get into a car accident and probably made some type of sin. It doesn't happen for no reason. What do you think, I'm a tzaddik? I make sins also. So, I did something. I don't know what I did. I have to do some cheshbonot. When I get home, Bezat Hashem, I have to do some cheshbonot shamayim, see what's going on. What did I do? Cheshbon nefesh. I have to figure out what did I do to get into a car accident on the way to a lecture. Okay, one end I could explain it in a nice way, say it's the Satan's fault. But Satan doesn't have rule over the world. I have to sign off on something. I have to do something to influence him, to give him permission. So suffering is kaparat avonot. Anyone who did not hear my personal story, my personal tshuva story, it's in the CDs. It's the first track in the black one. It's a very popular lecture, Baruch Hashem. People from all over the world have been influenced by it. It involves millions of dollars, fame, fortune, a medical mystery, a medical disaster, and 7 years of fighting for my life until I found the truth. It's an interesting story, Baruch Hashem. I'm not going to go into it now. But nonetheless, as the prophet Jeremiah starts the 3rd chapter of Echa, the book of Lamentations, he says, I know suffering. That's how he starts the book. I know suffering. He saw the Choban Beit HaMikdash. He saw a river of blood of Am Yisrael. He knows suffering. In my little level, I know suffering too. Not like him, but I know suffering, Baruch Hashem. So when this Gemara tells me here, you made a sin, you're going to get suffering, I have an answer. I got some suffering. But then it says, Avon, you get death penalty. When someone makes an intentional sin, and Hashem pretty much says your time's clocked out, we ran out of time, that's what we get a death penalty for. So then the Mishnah continues, or the Gemara continues, and it says, En mita belochet dichtiv, there is no death without a transgression, without an accidental sin. And he uses Ezekiel 18:20 as a source. Anefesh hachotet itamut, ben lo yisa be'avon ha'av, ve'av lo yisa be'avon ha'ben. Tzidkat ha'tzadik alav tiyeh, ve'rishat ha'rasha alav tiyeh. The soul that sins, it will die. The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father, nor shall the father bear the iniquity of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. So here we see that he explains the Mishnah in a very simple way, telling us that if you're suffering for any reason whatsoever, there's a reason for it. If someone dies, whether it's early, late, there's a reason for it. If this gulgolet, if this skull is here, there's a reason for it. Now many people like to go after Rabbi Mizrahi because of some things that he said and taught about reincarnation, about autistic children, about children that die at young age, about people that get diseases, people that are born with different different types of disabilities. But in reality, anyone that actually studied a little bit of Torah would know that everything he says has a source. This being one of them. This is the Gemara. This it also comes from the Zohar, comes from Kabbalah, comes from Divrei Chazal, comes from Reshit Chochmah. There's countless sources that back everything that he says. Why does everybody still don't like to hear it? Number one, because they're ignorant and they don't think there's an actual source. And number two, because it's not politically correct to say that someone that came to this world with a disease of some kind, or someone that died early, it's his fault. Doesn't sound nice. But Hashem told you it does. Hashem told you it is his fault. Doesn't necessarily make him a bad person, doesn't make you better. But if we don't take responsibility for our actions, how are we going to do tshuva? So first and foremost, anyone that wants to learn a little bit about Gilgulim, about reincarnations, everything that we really know as far as understanding from reincarnation and all of the mystical parts of the Torah, most of it came from the Zohar, we got from the Arizal, who his student wrote a book on his behalf called Sha'ar Gilgulim, the Gate of Reincarnation, and from there we have a lot of different secrets. Now, most people, myself included in the past, thought that reincarnation is cool. It's great, I get another chance. So if I don't do tshuva now, I'll do tshuva next time. So I do tshuva. If I'm not going to keep Shabbat now, Hashem's going to return it. These tzaddikim are telling me that I'm going to come back again. Some say we're going to come back 3 times. Some say more. There's Divrei Chazal says that 3 times you come back, and people think, oh, I only have 3 chances, so obviously if I'm here, this is maybe my last chance, maybe not. It's a 50-50 shot. So to explain that, it's not 3 chances. It could be many, many chances. It's just 3 chances as a human being. 3 chances in a row as a human being. After that, it's a Baal Chaim. After that, it's an animal. After that, it could be a plant. And after that, it could be a domem, a rock. There is different proofs, scientific proofs of that too. Anyone that wants to look at it, there's actually rocks that move. In the desert, different places in the desert, in the United States, in the Middle East, in different places around the world that have deserts, there are actually rocks that move. Now, obviously, they don't move like us. They don't go to the, to the store in 5 minutes. But if they actually took cameras and they left them there for an extended period of time, and they saw that the actual rocks moved across the desert, and they made streaks on the ground. Just like the car behind me that was right before it smashed into me made some streaks, the rocks also make some streaks. There's also a pasuk in the Torah where it says the rocks that scream. What do you mean rocks that scream? Why is a rock screaming? So there's a part of a soul there. So that's one. So it's not 3 times and we're out, it's 3 times as a human being. Now, obviously, an animal can't do the ultimate tshuva like a human being can. So in essence, the animal's goal would be if there is a soul in it. Not every animal has a soul. Some are just animals. Some have a human soul in them, which is a huge level of suffering, by the way, for the wrong soul to be in the wrong, the right soul to be in the wrong body. But in essence, this is a topic that a lot of people don't feel comfortable with, because when you really understand a Gilgul, when you really understand a reincarnation, you understand that in general, all reincarnations, all of them are a form of punishment. It's not a good thing. It's a good thing because it's a form of Hashem's mercy, not to give us, eternal punishment, chas v'shalom, but it is a punishment. Because once the soul leaves this world, it gets an opportunity to see the real world. And once it sees the real world, it sees that there's Gan Eden, eternal good, eternal greatness, eternal pleasure. And then it's being told, hey, listen, you got to go back. You got to go back. What is it like? The sages explain that this is like someone who had some financial issues and told his family, listen, I'm going to go away to a faraway place to go make some money, and I'll come back in a few years. Not like today where you go on a plane, 3 hours later you're in a different country. Back then you had to travel on a boat, Sometimes just a trip will take 6-7 months. So he went 6-7 months on a boat. Now if he went for 6 months on a boat, he's not going to stay there for a month. He worked there for a few years, 2, 3, 4 years. After that, same trip back, he's already gone for 5 years. He sends a letter before he got back, so make sure that the family waits for him at where he's going to land. Finally, he gets there. He's about to give his family a big hug and a kiss. And the border patrol stops him and says, "Oh, we have a description of someone that looks exactly like you. And it says here that we're not allowed to let you in." He says, "Why? What did I do?" "So, you borrowed $10. $10 from some guy named Shmuley in the place that you were in, and you have to return it." He goes, "You know how long it took me to get here? It took me 6 months to get here. And I've been gone for 4 years. And in 6 months, I was gone for 5 years. You want me to go back all the way over there for $10? Listen, I'll give you $1,000. Give me $1,000. What's $10? I'll go back there for $10? I'll give you $1,000. You send it to him. And keep the other $900 for yourself." "Sorry, sir. We're honest people. We don't do such a service. Only way is for you to go back, pay the $10, and then come back." This is what a Gilgul is. This is what a reincarnation is. Someone that borrowed $10 from a friend. Someone that borrowed $100 from a family member and did not return it in their life unless that person said machulecha, 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 meaning I forgive you, which most people don't really think about that. Unless that debt was forgiven, it's considered stealing. It's considered gezel. You stole it. And no one that has gezel on his hands can go into Gan Eden. Meaning you could be Rabbi Akiva. You could have mitzvot like Moshe Rabbeinu. You get to Gan Eden, the gate, "Sorry, sir, you still owe $10 to Tzvika back in Israel. You have to go back. They have to put you into another body." And this, they say, Chazal says, is a higher level of suffering than some parts of Gehenom. Because here you saw, it was right there, it was within your reach. I made all my mitzvot, I did shuvah, I kept Shabbat, I kept this, I kept that. $10 I have to go back to this life of suffering. And who says that I'm going to survive? I'm going to do tshuva again. That I'm going to keep mitzvot this time. I'm not going to fall for the girl. I'm not going to fall for the guy. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. Who knows? Gilgul is not exactly something we should rely on. You have a chance. You have a chance to do tshuva now. You have a chance to do good now. Now, sometimes we have a person that came to this world in what looks to us like an unfortunate situation. Autistic, brain damage, all types of disabilities. And people have a very, very hard time talking about this. Because they think that they're miskenim. They think that they're poor people. Baruch Hashem, over the last probably 25 to 30 years, maybe even longer, we've had technology that allows us to communicate with some of them. Not all of them, but some of them, many of them. And in many cases we found out a lot of different secrets of what they really feel, and what they really think. And there's actually proof, the scientific proofs, that some of these people have told us that they still have knowledge and memory of their previous life. One of them has made, there's a few of them that have made videos you can watch online. One of them I remember watching one time. They communicate with him through a computer, and they ask him all different types of questions. And he keeps telling them that they have to do tshuva, they have to do tshuva. And it's like, okay, but why are you here? Aren't you suffering? Isn't it bad for you? He says, I made a really big sin. That's why I came back. So, you say really big sin, what are you thinking? Automatically, you're thinking karet, you're thinking Shabbat, you're thinking zera levatala, wasting seed, you're thinking he married a goya, you're thinking the worst possible thing in the world. So I made a really big sin. He had a very hard time admitting what the sin was. Finally he admits, He says, I said Lashon Hara. I said Lashon Hara. That's why I came back as a brain-damaged person in this world. Lashon Hara. Is any one of us here finish a day without saying Lashon Hara? Forget a lifetime. We go to Beit Knesset to say Lashon Hara, or to at least gather some ammunition so we can say Lashon Hara after. Have something to talk about. Make the day interesting. So now, automatically people say, oh, misken, he's suffering so much. They asked him this. He says, you should feel bad for you, he says. I'm a tzaddik, he says. I'm almost done with my tikkun. And then I'm going to Gan Eden. You have a long way to go, he tells them. These neshamot that come down in autistic children, brain damaged people, their knowledge, they feel bad for us. They feel bad for us because they already know the truth. We feel bad for them because we don't know the truth. What are the sins that they made? I'm not God. I don't know what everybody's sins are. What I do know is that Chazal tells us, Midah keneged midah lo paska me'haolam. The measure for measure punishment did not cease to exist from the world after the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. There are certain mitzvot in the Torah that are no longer applicable. We can't make korbanot. We don't have a Beit HaMikdash. Even though one of my students keeps asking about making a korban, I keep telling him we can't make a korban. I'd like to join him to do it, but we can't make korban. Once the Beit HaMikdash was built, no more korbanot. Once the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, no more korbanot. Only korban is allowed is in a sacrifice is allowed in the Beit HaMikdash. So that is an enormous mitzvah. If you look at the 613 mitzvot that we have, biblical mitzvot that we have, you'll see that many of them, a large percentage of them have to do with korbanot, with sacrifice. Which means that a large part of these mitzvot that we got from Hashem, we can't do. So this is missing. But it's not up to us. Hashem made this rule. So some things are no longer valid. Some things are no longer applicable until the Beit HaMikdash, the third one, is built. But Hashem is specifically telling us here, but my measure for measure, the way I calculate punishment and reward, measure for measure, with or without the Beit HaMikdash, is valid. With or without you agreeing with it is valid. With or without you liking it, it's valid. And this is something that's the reason why the Rambam put it as one of the 13 principles of faith. Whether we like it, don't like it, believe it, don't believe it, doesn't make a difference. Why? Because it has countless sources in the Torah. So, each time one of these souls comes here, obviously it's very difficult for the family around them. May Hashem have mercy on them. Each time we see it from the outside perspective, it looks even worse. We don't know how they deal with, one day. But in reality, Chazal is telling us, everyone that's in that situation, there's a reason for it. Now, to think otherwise, when people are trying to be politically correct, and they're saying, oh, you're saying that this guy watched pornography and that's why he's blind. You're saying that this guy said Lashon Hara and that's why he can't speak. You're saying that this guy stole, that's why he can't move his arms. All types of things that it makes logical sense. If you stole, then you wouldn't have arms. If you violated the Torah through your eyes, you wouldn't be able to see. It makes logical sense. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not that every single blind person watched pornography, but it's a logical explanation. It's a hypothetical example. But to think anything else, meaning to think that that person is blind and he's purely a misken. It's just like, poor guy, he didn't do it, no, he's a tzaddik, he's a good guy. To think that is actually kfirah. To think that he doesn't deserve that punishment is kfirah against Hashem. Because in essence what you're saying is that Hashem made a mistake. Hashem shouldn't have given him blindness. Hashem shouldn't have given him poverty. Hashem shouldn't have given him a disability. To say that Hashem should do something or not is a problem. So actually the best explanation, the most correct explanation is the one that we have from the Torah. There's no suffering without sin. Now even though a lot of people don't like to hear it, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it, this is something that's very, very important because it's something that's repeated constantly. Every time someone wants to go against a rabbi that rebukes or a rabbi that helps people do tshuva through what the Torah says, through the instruction that the Torah says, and he mentions things like this, the first thing they mention is like, oh, he talks about autistic people. Oh, he talks about blind people. He talks about this and he talks about that. Yeah, the Torah talks about it too. And this is the Mishnah. This exact Mishnah is telling the Hillel, which we learned from previous Mishnayot, just to know how big a teacher is, first you need to know his students. Because sometimes you don't know how good the teacher is. It says, the Gemara in Masechet Brachot says, a student will take 40 years to understand what his rabbi really said. What do you mean? I came to the drasha, I listened to the rabbi, after that I had a meeting with him, I understood what he said perfectly. Because no, to really understand what the rabbi really meant, if the rabbi knew you, if it's personal advice, the rabbi knows you, to really understand what he means, take you 40 years. Just like Am Yisrael took 40 years to finally understand the Gdulah of Moshe Rabbeinu. So Hillel said his top student was Yonatan ben Uziel. His worst student was Rabbi Yochanan. Yonatan ben Uziel was so holy that whenever he would study Torah, it would create a spiritual fire that if a bird flew over him, it would go on fire. I study, nothing happens. Bird flies, bird doesn't fly, doesn't even look at me sometimes. He studies, fire. Bird goes on fire. I think about fire. Rabbi Yochanan was the least of his students. What did Rabbi Yochanan know? He knew the entire Torah by heart. All the Midrashim, all the Shulchan Aruch, all the Gemara, all the Zohar, all the Mishnayot, all of the Maaseh Bereshit, meaning what happened before this world. All of Maaseh Merkava, what happens beyond this world. Also, if that's not enough, he also knew the language of the Shedim. Shedim would come, he would talk to them. Demons come, you talk to them. We see a demon, we run away. We get a heart attack, Chas v'shalom. He would talk to them. Malachim come, they talk to him also. He knew their language. If that wasn't enough, once in a while he talked to trees and birds. He knows that. You know the language of the trees and birds. We barely know how to spell bird, but he knew how to talk to them. This is the least of Hillel's students. And this is Hillel that's saying this. This is the Hillel that's talking about this skull. And he's saying, you skull, you're only a skull floating over here because you made a sin. You killed somebody and that's why somebody killed you. You made somebody's skull float in the middle of the river and not have a proper burial, and that's why Hashem did it to you. And the people that did it to you will also get the same thing. Somebody like that you should listen to.